Good afternoon, everyone. We've seen the amazing images of locust plagues spreading through the Middle East, Sardinia, and now the United Nations wants to spend money on planes to control them by air. Even China throwing 100,000 ducks. And what's most interesting, if we look where the red lines are, this is the locust progression, but it follows the fertile crescent. Now dry, once fertile croplands, and we see the same thing, North Africa. Grand solar minimum intensification was supposed to bring more rains, shifting cloud cells, and here we are in a multi-millennia shift. Egypt floods for the fourth year in a row. Somalia, area on the Aksum kingdom controlling the incense roots. And Harappa, one of the oldest civilizations on the planet, now dry in Afghanistan. Oh wait, this is the floods in Afghanistan. Floods in Pakistan. These locusts are feasting off new grow zones emerging. These empires were not able to have such vast reach with no water resources. So deep into the desert, we are repeating thousand-year cycles. The Wall Street Journal reported hackers are ramping up attacks on retirement accounts. And this has made Americans realize that the amazing returns on the stock market through the last 10 years, that retirement accounts, in particular, can be a hacker's dream, and they're not checked nearly as often as other financial accounts. And as we head toward an election and the U.S.-China trade war taking now a backseat to Asian supply chain disruptions, Brexit, and concerns over cyber threats, only one investment stands out: gold. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer 4 years in a row, 2016 through 2019. And Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver, and you work directly with an owner to avoid paying absurd broker fees. Call today to request a free gold and silver investment kit, or click the link in the description box below, patriotgoldgroup.com. And since the middle of last year, the locust plagues across Africa, moving over into the Middle East and over into the Indian subcontinent, now into China, these amazing images coming out. Vast swarms of locusts, visible as brown clouds moving across the landscape. They're even in the cities here in Yemen and Kenya. And wherever you look, from Somalia to Sardinia, the word's biblical, unprecedented. We haven't seen this many countries since the Old Testament. The problem with the yellow locust is they become poisonous as they transition into the massive clouds of never-ending mouths eating through the crops and anything edible, leaving just nubs in the landscape as they pass. To the point now that the United Nations is trying to raise more money to get more planes into the air, because if nothing's done, the images I just show you are going to go 500x by June, which would be unprecedented, really. This would be something so far off the scale of what you consider reality that there would be myths and legends written about this for thousands of years to come. China on the game, 十万只牙, meaning 100,000 ducks are gathering to eat these locusts. But when you put 100,000 ducks against something like this that's never ending, that you can see in the sky for 10 miles before it approaches, I guess those are going to be some well-fed ducks. What's the reason there's so many locusts, though? See that green stuff on the ground growing, where usually it's desert? This is explained by the intensifying grand solar minimum in the shift, and how our cloud cells, intertropical convergence zone, moisture patterns along with the jet streams are shifting as our sun goes into a 400-year low in solar activity. Now, on the regular grand solar minimum cycle, I would agree 400 years, but this looks like it's a much more heavy, powerful cycle, and the multi-thousand-year cyclicity returning. Now, the intertropical convergence zone is what's forming some of these monsoons that we're so used to, that we see across Asia, where it rains, they grow the rice. This shifts as our sun goes through massive changes in high solar activity or low solar activity on a 400-year cycle. These have been mapped out. This is where things shift off the equator and how moisture patterns move. This is peer-reviewed science. There's thousands of papers on this. So you could do some of your own research. Now, the cloud cells across the planet also are shifting as this intertropical convergence zone shifts, meaning moisture is moving into new areas it hasn't in between 400 and 2,000 years. And that would explain where all these new grasslands are emerging across the Middle East and North Africa. These are new grow zones. So as northern Canada gets too cold for us to grow traditional crops, new areas on the planet such as Iran, the Middle East, and North Africa are starting to get green again, which means we'd be able to grow crops there. And it's just magnificent the way that the locusts are showing us where the new greening areas on the planet are, where these new grow zones are emerging, well, I should say re-emerging, are happening. To follow the locusts, they're showing you where the plentiful new grasslands and new soon-to-be croplands are starting. So let's drop back in time here. 3,500 years, Harappa, Indus Valley civilization. This is one of the cradles of civilization, along with Iraq, which we know is Mesopotamia. We here have the Harappa Indus Valley. That area going west into Pakistan, Afghanistan, even out into Gujarat in West India, incredibly dry, droughts for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Used to be a veritable garden. The accounts of how lush and how water-filled it was. Totally dry. And then look at what's happening in Afghanistan. Rivers running after thousands of years. And if you think that's impressive, take a look at how these villages are being inundated with floodwaters these last 3 years. Of course, something's changing. And then we look at Pakistan. You can't tell me that's normal rainfall. This is literally 4 months worth of rain in 30 minutes kind of flooding that's going on. And let's follow the extent of the locust plague when it started about 8 months ago in eastern Africa. And as you can see, it started to move northward and expand across what was the Fertile Crescent before, across Oman and Yemen, kept moving over into Afghanistan, Iran, over into India, into the India northeast states, through Bangladesh, and now into China. What do I mean about the Fertile Crescent? Well, again, the birthplace of one segment of civilization. They didn't call it the Fertile Crescent for nothing. Desert today, but 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, this was lush, river-filled, fruit trees, orchards, honey, wine, milk, animal husbandry, and bountiful food, wheat and crops growing exactly where you see here across the Middle East. But today it's just barren and dry. These are cycles in climate on multi-thousand-year cycles. This is the old Roman grain-growing areas across North Africa. And you can see it encompasses a lot of Egypt. There's the Nile at the bottom there, Red Sea to the right. And then these other countries we keep hearing about in the news recently, Libya, Algeria, Tunisia, grain-growing areas. Dry before, but they've had record production this last 2 years. All four of those countries I've mentioned. In case in point, the floods that are rolling through Egypt as this video is being made. And this year is the third year we've seen record rainfalls across Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman, where lakes are now forming in the dunes, coastal area. Yemen as well becoming much more fertile, a new grow zone emerging there. And then jumping over to Iran, anywhere you see dark blue is all-time ever recorded record rains in that country. And then the record snowfall right up the Caspian Sea. I did a video on that just about 3 days ago. So why there's so many locusts? Well, when you're looking at the left, 2018, but you have to realize that's an enormous amount of rainfall and new vegetation that was grown in that year comparatively to, say, 2010, 2009, when it was still really dry. Fast forward 1 year, look how much more there is for those locusts to feast on. A new grow zone is emerging. Is it really about the energy resources or about the food that we can grow in these places that we really want? Maybe we went for the oil first, now we're going for the food second. Because you can't have this many locusts going through what was dry desert without anything to eat. These are going to be trillion-strong hordes of locusts moving through over the next couple of months, especially when the weather starts to warm up. Now, if the locusts aren't turned yellow and green, they're still edible. So, bountiful fodder for animals, as well as human, if you're able to eat those. But the crops are devastated. So, it's a trade-off. You get the protein, but you have no more crops left. UN's also calling for mass starvation across Africa because of these very same locusts. Locusts are here for a few days. You can catch a few, eat the protein, but they've eaten all plants in sight by the time they leave. And you see where the highest infestations and mass clouds of these things by the hundreds of billions moving across where the red dots are. And this map hadn't been updated through this month. This was in December of 2019, so you could see where the hot spots were. And right there, Harappa, if you look over India just a little bit west, the Harappa Indus Valley area there, new grow zone emerging. And it's just interesting along the incense route, Red Sea, Western Saudi Arabia, can't be that many locusts, man. There has to be a lot of vegetation for these things to be moving in, showing up as such hot spots on these maps here. Kenya, worst locust in 70 years. Tunisia, worst in 60 years. But interestingly, when we look at the incense route that was formerly Yemen, this was a vast empire called the Aksum. They had their own gold coinage that was the standard of the day. Post-Roman Empire, but there had to be an enormous amount of rainfall for caravans and civilization to have such a vast grasp on that area, moving up past Mecca, which is bone dry today. And when we do look out there, there's a vast array of archaeological sites, and what we see also in Petra, the way they cut away part of these rocks to create these buildings. Some say when you put your head against the walls, you're able to access different portals, and we see this in Myanmar, we see it here in Saudi Arabia and many other places across the world where these seemingly empty buildings are, but they're portals to another dimension, supposedly. But I don't know if that's water erosion down there, similar to what the Sphinx is, but you can see the wind erosion at the top for sure. Definitely a different pattern there. You can't make all this without water. There was vast amounts of water and precipitation difference during these times that were not really taught about in our history classes too frequently. And I encourage you to look into the Incense Road with ancient Yemen and moving from Marib up to Cairo through Medina. But then when we look at Somalia, you start to see the same thing. These massive floods are back. That's why the locusts are there. The rains are returning after thousands of years. And it appears now that these swarms of locusts are so vast and so all-encompassing around at least half of our planet that now they've made their way into China. These swarms of locusts were sighted moving into Yunnan province from Myanmar, northern Myanmar, after they crossed over the Indian Northeast states. Now, this is the thing I'm trying to figure out here. It's really cold right now in the Indian Northeast states. They could go coastal, but, the record cold across Bangladesh this year and record cold across India, record snowfall, record cold in northern Myanmar. I'm just not so sure how many of these locusts could actually make it into China right now. So that's a wild card, and I'm still trying to backtrack this story to even see is indeed this true, because if they do, that area in Yunnan, which is Kunming, the main capital city for that province, is a vast, massive agricultural region that supplies a good part of China with fresh vegetables. Now, we already know where the Maunder minimum reconstruction was for temperature drops, precipitation changes from, say, 1680 to 1700 is a real good gauge right in there. But where you see the darkest of blue, that's where the biggest amount of temperature change was. So obviously with these temperature changes, we're going to get precipitation changes. And then with some more updated research, they show you even more succinctly where these areas of temperature drops were up to almost 2 degrees Celsius in the darkest of blue. And that would include North Africa around Morocco, and you can't really see around the bottom of the globe there into the equator, but this explains very much why we're seeing skies moving 5 to 10 miles out before these locust swarms approach and nibble everything in their path. And when you see biblical locust plagues like this, how do you even combat against something like this? That looks like a blizzard raging. That's insects in the air. You will understand why there's so many of them because of the new emerging grow zones as our grand solar minimum intensifies. Solar cycle 25 is the transition point here. And I encourage you to do more research on what a grand solar minimum is on my site, oilseedcrops.org, or you can just look in a search engine, Grand Solar Minimum. And that's the reason we made the February March Adapt 2030 Store More. Sunspots condensed, because it is about getting some non-perishable food for yourselves right now in these unknown times. There's other changes that are making people's minds shift on preparedness. So how prepared are you? Because so many companies at the moment have run out of their supply of storable foods. Luckily, my Patriot Supply still has stock. 2-week grab-and-go food crate, or the 4-week food supply. Adapt 2030 and My Patriot Supply. Trusted self-reliance. The link's in the description box below. I thank you for listening to what I had to say tonight, and I will see you next video.